The first time I realized love could disappear under bright lights, it felt like standing on a stage while the floor quietly collapsed beneath my feet. Applause roared, cameras blinked red, and the world saw a perfect version of us smiling like nothing was wrong. But behind the lens, when the lights dimmed and the crowd went home, something fragile and honest briefly came alive between us, only to vanish again the moment the cameras returned. That contradiction became the quiet ache that defined my life. If you believe in kindness, second chances, and the idea that real love should never need a spotlight to survive, take a moment right now to like this video, share it with someone who needs it, leave a comment, and subscribe to the channel. Your support helps stories like this reach the hearts they're meant for. I never planned on becoming someone whose life was constantly recorded. I grew up in a small town in Oregon where the loudest sound was usually the rain on the roof or a train passing through at night. I worked hard, kept my head down, and believed success was something you earned quietly. When social media started turning ordinary people into brands, I stayed far away from it, convinced that a life measured in likes would never be real. That belief changed the night I met her at a charity gala in Los Angeles, a place that felt like another planet compared to home. She was already famous when we met, the kind of famous where people recognized her silhouette before her face. Cameras followed her the way shadows follow sunlight, and she moved through the room with practiced grace, smiling at the right angles, laughing at the right moments. I was there as a guest of a client, uncomfortable in my suit, wishing I could disappear into the walls. Somehow we ended up talking, and for reasons I still don't fully understand, she looked at me like I was real in a room full of performances. At first, our connection felt accidental, like something that slipped past the guards. We talked about books no one expected her to read, about places I missed, about fears that didn't belong on magazine covers. She laughed in a way that sounded unedited, and for brief moments the noise of the room faded. When we exchanged numbers, I told myself not to overthink it. People like her didn't end up with people like me, but she kept calling, and I kept answering. Dating her meant learning two versions of reality. There was the public version, carefully styled and endlessly documented. That version had perfect photos, coordinated outfits, and captions written by teams who understood engagement better than emotion. In that world, I was an accessory, a supporting character who smiled on cue and stayed quiet. Then there was the private version, hidden in quiet apartments and late-night drives, where she kicked off her heels, complained about exhaustion, and rested her head on my shoulder like she didn't have to be anything else. That was where she loved me fully and softly, when no one was watching. At first, I told myself that was enough. I understood her world was complicated. Fame was a machine that never slept, and I was proud of her success. I learned to stand slightly behind her at events, to avoid saying the wrong thing, to accept that our relationship belonged more to the audience than to us. But slowly, the imbalance began to weigh on me. Online, she treated me like a storyline, something to tease or withhold depending on what worked best for her image. Offline, she clung to me like a lifeline, confessing how lonely it all felt. The hardest part wasn't the cameras themselves, but what they changed in her. Around them, her eyes hardened just a little, her smile sharpened, and her voice shifted into something rehearsed. She stopped reaching for my hand in public, stopped acknowledging the way I looked at her, stopped seeing me as more than a role. Fans speculated endlessly, creating narratives that had nothing to do with us. And instead of correcting them, she leaned into the mystery. Every rumor meant more attention, and attention was the currency she lived on. I tried to talk to her about it, about how invisible I felt, about how loving me only in private was slowly hollowing me out. She listened, always sincerely, always promising it would get better after the next project, the next campaign, the next milestone. I believed her because I wanted to. Love makes you patient even when patience hurts. I convinced myself that one day she would choose us over the image, that real love would eventually win. But time has a way of exposing patterns. Months turned into years and nothing changed. I became skilled at swallowing disappointment, at pretending I didn't care when articles erased me or reduced me to speculation. I watched her celebrate milestones alone in public while leaning on me in secret. The world adored her confidence, never seeing the vulnerability she saved for darkness. And I loved her enough to hold that vulnerability, even as it cost me pieces of myself. The breaking point didn't come in a dramatic explosion. It came quietly, during an award season when her schedule was relentless. One night, after a long event where she barely acknowledged me, we returned to her place. She collapsed into my arms, exhausted, grateful and loving in the way she always was when no one could see. In that moment, the truth finally settled in me with painful clarity. I wasn't her partner. I was her refuge. I existed to support her when the performance ended, not to share a life in the light. Realizing that didn't make me angry at first. It made me deeply sad. I understood why she was the way she was. Fame had taught her that love was conditional, that privacy was dangerous, that authenticity could cost everything. But understanding someone doesn't mean you're obligated to disappear for them. Loving someone doesn't mean accepting half a life. Leaving her was the hardest decision I've ever made. There was no villain, no betrayal that would make it easier. Just the slow acceptance that I deserved to be loved openly, without conditions. When I finally walked away, there were no cameras to capture it, no dramatic headlines, just two people sitting in silence, one finally choosing himself. Life after her was quieter, and at first, it felt empty. I moved back north, closer to the rain and the kind of anonymity that heals. I started over in small ways, reconnecting with friends I'd neglected, rediscovering hobbies I'd abandoned. The absence of constant validation was unsettling, but it was also freeing. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was competing with an audience for my own relationship. Healing didn't happen all at once. There were nights I missed her deeply, missed the version of her that only existed in the dark. I wondered if I'd made a mistake, if love like that was as good as it got. But slowly, something else grew in the space she left behind. A sense of self-respect I hadn't known I'd lost. The understanding that real love should not require you to shrink. Eventually, I met someone new, not in a glamorous setting, but through ordinary circumstances that felt refreshingly unremarkable. She didn't have a public persona to protect, no image to curate. She saw me as I was and never asked me to hide. Being with her taught me how different love feels when it's consistent, when affection doesn't change depending on who's watching. There was no secret version of us, no public performance, just honesty, even when it was messy. Sometimes I still see my ex on screens, glowing and successful, living the life she always wanted. I don't resent her. I hope she finds a way to reconcile who she is with who the world expects her to be. I hope she learns that love doesn't have to be rationed. But I no longer confuse the love she gave me in private with the kind of love I deserve. This story isn't about blaming fame or vilifying anyone. It's about recognizing the quiet ways we sometimes accept less than we need because we're afraid of losing what we have. It's about understanding that love should make you feel whole, not hidden. And it's about having the courage to walk away, even when staying feels easier. If this story touched your heart, if it reminded you of a time you felt unseen or loved only in fragments, please take a moment now to like this video, share it, and subscribe. Your engagement helps these stories reach others who might need the reminder that they matter. And before this story ends, I want to ask you something personal. Please comment below and tell us one thing you believe real love should never make you feel. Your words might help someone else find the strength they need. I learned, slowly and painfully, that being loved only when the cameras were off wasn't love at all. It was a compromise that asked me to disappear so someone else could shine. Walking away taught me that the right kind of love doesn't dim you, doesn't hide you, and doesn't need permission to exist in the light. It stands beside you openly, honestly, and without fear. And once you experience that, you never settle for anything less again.